Hello, everybody. Welcome. Let me just look around. I didn't have a particular topic for today, so I thought I would go back to surfing around the OSR subreddit and see if that see if any of the topics there inspire some conversation. Feel free to throw anything into the chat if you are watching the stream live, and we can talk about it. I will get the chat overlaid up. There we go. And let me get the OSR Reddit up. Where am I? Where did I go? No, not there. Oops. This is interesting. Can I do it like so? No. All right. Well, I guess you will not see my face. Probably no big loss. Wait, what about that? Aha, there we go. Okay. That's better. I like that. Ooh, what's this? Ooh, is that better or is that better? Or is that better? That makes it too small. All right. And it's going to translate very well to the audio version where you're just hearing me do things and not seeing anything. Sorry, I was just messing around with the interface. All right. So one of the things that happened, one of the other lunchtime streams that I did is I stumbled on to a thread at our OSR that seemed interesting, but it happened right at the end of the stream and I didn't actually get a chance to look at it. So I thought that is where I will start. The topic was old school essentials or AD&D second. I'm going to refresh the screen just so I get the best or the latest and greatest topics. So let's read it. I didn't actually read it. I just saw the title and it jumped out at me. This was posted by Carnipope. As I dusted off my old AD&D second books and boxes, good old Planescape nostalgia gripped me, and I am tempted to run some games with my family the way I was introduced into the hobby. Skimming the internet, I quickly stumbled over the term OSR, and it seems old school essentials seems to be a very popular choice among them. Before spending any money and the fact that I already own much AD&D second stuff, it would interest me what distinguishes OSR, especially OSE, from AD&D second. Is there any improvement from the old AD&D second stuff worth switching to OSE? And if so, there are two versions of OSE, classical and advanced fantasy. Is advanced fantasy referring to AD&D and classical to OD&D? Most books seem to be for advanced fantasy. The main drive for these questions is, as mentioned, I want to introduce my family to some old style of RPGing. I don't know why he keeps spelling old that way. Maybe that's just something he likes. O as in old as in O-U-L-D. Oh, let's see. There are younger children among them, and I am aware AD&D second may be a tad overwhelming with opposing mechanics like roll over and roll under, etc. Maybe OSC is easier to grasp. Thanks in advance. Okay, so I was hoping this would be more of a sort of a Thunderdome of editions, but it's not, which is fine. This is actually, I think, a fairly good question. There are two ways you can look at it. One is which would be maybe if you're going to go try OSR, what might be your OSR version of choice? And two, we have what version of D&D is OSE, I don't know, based off of a retro clone of. I believe that OSE, right? Well, I know that OSE is a clone, a retro clone, or a update of the basic expert, and I believe the advanced stuff, somebody correct me if I'm wrong, does try to bring in some of the more AD&D concepts. No Fun Allowed says in the chat, OSC is just easy to pick up and read. It's so well organized. Yes, that is the one thing that folks love about OSC, is it is extremely well organized. That is probably the most outstanding thing that anyone says about it. I believe you can find the OSC books. I think it's just sort of a plain text version, maybe not all the advanced stuff and all the source books, but you can find a lot of the books for free, I believe, in just text, no graphics on Drive-Thru RPG. So that is an option if you want to check it out before delving any further. I think my usual choice comes in, if you have the books, use the books you've got. You can always pare down things that you don't think you'll need. So if you have family members with kids and you're not sure the kids are going to grok all the different things in second edition, just don't play with that stuff, or just gloss over that for them. You know, you could even have one character who plays a fighter, and maybe just behind the scenes, if there are fighter. I know. In second edition, you started getting into skill packages and things like that. But if you want to just have the fighter just play a very basic fighter, then maybe one of the adults plays something more complicated. I think you can mix and match them if you're willing to handle it. You have a lot of options there. I don't know in terms of actually running the game if OSE, other than its organization from just a teaching to kids kind of aspect, if OSE is going to feel much easier than Basic Expert or second edition. I mentioned this might have been my last video, but I'll say it again. I've come to the conclusion that I think it is easier to teach something that is based on the D20 system in terms of having a single adjudication mechanic. I do think that's easier. I know a lot of folks, myself included, have a lot of nostalgia and are drawn to the quirkiness and of having some things roll under, some things roll over, some things be X and 6 chance, some things be percentage, some things to be D20. But when you're trying to teach somebody, especially from scratch, and they haven't been living with versions of this game for eons, I think that the simpler that they've made those mechanics, and the more that you could just tell somebody, hey, it's always going to be a roll of D20, and it's always going to have either a set target or you're going to set a target, and you just want to roll high, and that's always going to be good. I think the easier that is, especially with kids. Right. I think if you can tell the 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12-year-old, hey, just roll that D20 and you want to roll high, higher is better. That is, I think, infinitely preferable to having all these situations of, well, situationally you want it to be low, sometimes you want it to be high. Right. It's just not as easy. I just don't think there's any way around it. And I think I've had enough practical experience with how it can be complicated and hard to grasp, especially if you're not embedded in the game and in the hobby and playing it a lot and being with it a lot, to be able to make that kind of statement. So I would pick probably not even OSE as my OSR for teaching younger kids. I would really look to one, or I would say adapt something like Target 20, so I can just give them a single thing they have to roll, and then everything else I can do behind the screen or kind of futz around with. But kids especially, well, everybody loves rolling dice. You want to be able to look at that die roll and have some idea of is it good or is it bad. So being able to say, look, high is always good, low is always bad. Just make it easy for everybody to get. I'm sure there are a lot of comments in there, but let's go back and see what else is happening in our OSR. And no fun allowed. Thanks for joining the chat here. Help running before the Lost City. I talked about this with Daniel a little bit, Lost City. I know he likes this one a lot. I don't know that I have anything. It's been a while since I've read it. I guess I'll be curious. Let's see what their question is about. But I don't know if I can really help with that too much. This was posted by Rosenthal Grandmaster. Hey, I wanted to run before the Lost City as a starting point in my next Desertic campaign. He's using Lamentations of the Flame Princess as the rule set. Right at the beginning of the module, it says that this is a long-term campaign and that the player should have the time to rest. How are they supposed to rest safely? By allying with factions inside the pyramid, or can they rest in the ruined city that surrounds the pyramid dungeon? If they find gold, silver, and other valuable treasures that should gain them XP, should I count securing them to the ruined city outside as a recovered treasure? Therefore, reward them with XP, or should I give them money XP when they'll complete the dungeon and actually take their loot to a proper city? Thanks. Actually, that's a really good question. And it's applicable to a lot of modules, not just B4, because there might be a lot of situations in which you don't have that kind of generic keep on the Borderlands style setup with the safe place within a day's travel of the dungeon. And especially if it's a long campaign, they may not be going back and forth to that safe place for a long time. Dave Mills says in the chat, the module should be run backwards, going through the city first and then hit the pyramid. I think actually that's what they mean. I know. He's saying run it backwards, go. Oh, I see. Oh, I suppose that's one way to do it. I mean, you could run these in a lot of orders. I think if you're trying to run right by default, you start off in the desert, part of a caravan. I think you're running out of water, and then you have to get to the ruins, and then downwards. I forget. I'd have to look at a map to see the exact layout. So I apologize for my my lack of intimate knowledge at this moment of B4. But just in general, if your scenario necessitates them being away from what you would consider your default kind of home base or safe place, or that place where your gold, silver loot will activate into XP, then having them be able to establish a camp, some kind of strong point, or some kind of safe spot and say, okay, here's where you have to get stuff back to, I think is a good approach. And if that means some kind of encampment in the ruins, then so be it. And of course, you can have, there might be all kinds of society or all types of societies within the ruins, other folks who had been under similar circumstances and made it as far as the ruins, but for various reasons didn't delve deeper, but survived. You could think of things like Waterworld and the way they would have these atolls, these kind of armored bits of civilization that are floating around in the chaos. And obviously we're not on water. We're in the opposite of water in a desert, but the same kind of thing holds, where you could have bits of the ruins that have been fortified and turned into centers. Maybe there's even is some kind of trade that could emerge eventually. Obviously, you don't want it at the beginning because then the players will have no reason to stay. But maybe at some point, as a transformation that happens as they're adventuring, as they're bringing treasure and potential things into some kind of settled area, that settled area is going to need to do stuff with that right there. You can't become rich sitting on a pile of gold in the middle of nowhere. Maybe they start to actually try to reestablish some kind of trade or outside communications with the rest of the world, and that gives you some angles for moving forward. There's a lot of good stuff there. And then resting, same thing. You got to figure out the ruins. I don't remember in B4 if there are rules or how often wandering monsters are going through the ruins, but they should be able to establish some spot that they can potentially fortify, or at least find somewhere that's out of the way and safe so that they can rest for some period of time. Dave Mills also said there are 3 or 4 factions in the city, but you have to go through the pyramid to get to the underground city. Yeah, I was thinking about there, I believe, and Dave Mills, you can, because again, your memory seems like it's fresher than mine, but aren't there ruins at the top of the I guess of the dungeon, so to speak, or of the scenario, so that you're in the desert, you go to some kind of ruins, and then you start going down levels, and there are multiple different things. So I think the poster, or at least my interpretation of the posters, are talking about the ruins that are at the top. So kind of in the wilderness, in those initial ruins before you go through down into other stuff, not in the module. Okay, so that's my mistake. So yeah, so then so they would have to do some, and at that point they would have you could create something there if you feel like there should be there, or they'll have to do that initial dungeon crawl, get down into the underground city, and then set up shop there. Thanks for the clarifications. I should probably do B4 for the channel. Dave Mills also says there was a dungeon magazine pre-venture. Oh, cool. I didn't read a lot of the dungeon magazines back in the day. I will say, though, this is a good question and something you should think about whenever you're prepping a scenario, whether it's yours or from the books. Think about these things. If this is a long-running campaign, where can the party potentially set up some kind of permanent or quasi-permanent headquarters? How will that affect when they are awarded experience points? Where can they rest? How can they how can they just do it flat out? How can they rest? There got to be some places where at least is an option or something that they can create to rest. And just in general, how you want to deal with those things that don't come up if you're just running a one-shot, essentially, but will come up if you expect your party to hang around. All right, let's get back and get a new topic. What else we got? I don't know anything about Vaults of Varn. We got Shadow of Mog, a post-Brexit TTRPG. Not the time. Welcome to. Okay, I'm going to skip over. Okay, that's a review. I'll skip over the things that are made. Neoclassical Revival. All right, Neoclassical Geek Revival 2. Is that a product? Court card reaction rolls. All right, here that seems. Let's try this one. Okay, this was posted by Sean F. Smith. Court card reaction rolls. And they say, because I always am, I'm making another OD&D hack, this time with playing cards. This element stands alone. Like the big cheese, it stands alone. Instead of rolling 2d6 for reactions, draw a card at random from only the jacks, queens, and kings. Each suit represents a mood, and each value represents a way that mood is expressed. The table below summarizes the outcome, but you can learn the 7 elements and extrapolate during play to prevent needing to look up. This is actually, and I don't know if this is where they got their inspiration. I posted it. I didn't post it on Twitter. I think I ended up posting it to my Instagram, was a picture I took out of the Twilight 2000 rulebook that had something very similar. They used playing cards for reactions. I believe they used the whole deck, maybe minus the jokers, but it had kind of some neat elements with each suit representing kind of similar a mood. It was definitely more military based because you're Twilight 2000. You're dealing with kind of quasi-military units and things. Let me see if I can. Where's my phone? Do I have my phone? I can look it up. Let me see if I can look it up real quick. But let's give his a shot while I am seeing if I have this at the ready. Let's see. So he's got the Jack JC. What is that? Jack of Clubs. Mood is connections. Behavior is acting. Offers mutual benefit. Queen of Clubs. Connections. Behavior is holding. They're going to hold their ground. King of Clubs is connections is wielding. They're going to summon reinforcements. Now we go into Hearts. The Jack is fears. The behavior is acting, and they're going to run away. The Queen of Hearts is fears. The action is holding, so they're going to back away warily. And the King of Hearts is fears. The behavior is wielding, and they're going to make a display of power. So in general, what they're saying is essentially anytime you get a Jack, you're going to take the mood is based on the suit, and the behavior is based on which cards. Jacks are acts. Queens are holding. It's probably a better term for that. Holding, I get what they mean, kind of a holding action. Your maybe delay is maybe a better word for that. Oh, that's not what I want. Let's see. What else have we got? And then connection, and then kings are wielding. I don't know, wielding. Anyway. So in the Hearts, kings they're going to make a display of power. Then spades, jacks are attack on sight. Queens are stalk carefully. Kings are prove superiority. And then diamonds, jacks are give a gift. Queen is secure valuable location. And king is try to take PC resources. Well, it's pretty cool. I'm trying to see if I can find that. Is that it? Yeah, here we go. Okay, so the Twilight 2000 version of the similar thing, which I think I like. No offense to Sean F. Smith. I think I like the Twilight 2001 just a smidge more. It does use the whole deck, which means you get some gradations with the basically 2 through 10. So they have clubs. Let's see. So the motivations are essentially clubs are all about violence, brutality, and sort of war. The diamonds, their motivations are selfishness, but also could potentially be generosity, so giving and taking. Hearts are about sort of justice, honor, love, and sort of wisdom, and kind of social stuff. And then spades is charisma type stuff. Let's see. No Fun Allowed says, I've been dabbling making a card-based RPG too, but not using a deck of playing cards. I want unique cards based on class, race, perks, and backgrounds. Whew. Well, it sounds amazing. It sounds like that's also a lot of work. So would these be like individual but kind of tarotized cards? Or I'd be curious to hear more about that at some point. No Fun Allowed. I will post this. I'll grab this picture or I'll post a link to the Instagram post if you're interested in seeing it. It was on page 143 of the Twilight 2000 core rulebook. I'm not sure which version I have. Probably our edition. I think it's probably first or second, something like that. But these things are cool. The 2d6 reaction roll is great when you're just in a pinch. You just need something. But these are obviously the advantages that you get a lot more granularity, different feelings, right? I wouldn't mind either also, and this could be where you could work in more of the cards if you're using a playing deck, is those gradations and also having duplicate actions but have different feels. So for example, if in the connections, say these are clubs, you had some of the results were attacking, but attacking in a certain way, right? Attacking, or maybe the connections one's not a good idea. So say in the fears one, they're attacking, but they're doing it in a sort of in a retreating fashion. They're attacking, but kind of defensively backing up as they attack. If they have missile fire, maybe they will use that and backing away. They're not going to charge in and attack like they might. They're going to see if you're in range, they might attack you, but they're going to do it in a way where they're keeping their distance. So you're showing that they're being, in a way, aggressive, but doing it in a way that shows their fear. So you're getting these different flavors of the actions. Yes, they're attacking, but they're doing it in a particularly fearful way that adds some different flavor to it. They're not just attacking only when they're aggressive. They might be attacking out of these other mental places. Dave Mills says 2d6 lacks depth. Yes, it does. It just puts so what 2d6 is very simple. It does lack depth in and of itself. It's up to it. What it's really doing is making you as the GM create that depth from understanding what the creatures are, what their circumstances are, the context of the moment, and putting that all together. Some of these other methods give you some of those tools so that maybe with this kind of system, you not only have a motivation or lack thereof, you also have that behavioral part, and then only you have to do is take those two things, just add that context element. So I know that they're fearful. I know that they want to do a sort of an act, but fearfully. Now I just have to figure out the context. I think the benefits of the shallow, say 2d6, is that they can really be relevant in every situation. So I can use 2d6 when I'm role playing as a shopkeeper, and if they roll high, maybe they'll take a shine to the PCs and give them a better deal. If they roll really low, maybe they will be very not open to bargaining. Maybe even inflate their prices, giving them the stink eye. You can use it in a lot of situations. I can't use some of these options for a shopkeeper. What does a shopkeeper who is being regretful, doing a holding pattern, and is reacting by stalking them carefully? I mean, it just, at some point they get so granular that they only make sense for certain things and not others. Whereas the 2d6, I can use that everywhere. So while I like these tools and these other things for adding more flavors to these different mechanics, it is nice to also have just that plain mechanic, because it's the most useful in every circumstance. But this is cool. Sean F. Smith, good deal. Let me give you an upvote. Yeah, don't forget to upvote stuff. I know I forgot on the last one. I should probably go back and upvote if I can find it. There we go. I will upvote that one too. Upvoting is good. Dave Mills replying to No Fun Allowed. Demon City RPG uses a tarot deck, I believe. Yes. And there are some of the better games ones. If you've seen a couple of my videos looking at the better games material, they also use tarot cards. So there is that. Okay, I'm just going to keep going down, see what else we have here. D100 plus tormented locations. I'm not going to go through those because I'm assuming it's just a big list, but as you can see, plenty of resources here. Experience points for different modes of play. This one will be good, I hope. Oh, but it is linking to I don't want to go off OSR, so let me see what they say. Okay, they're just linking. But people like it. Should I go in? Should I delve in? This was posted by Luminescent Lich. Let me see what happens. If I click on that, is it going to stay in the sharing window? Okay, it does. All right, well, we'll take a look. People are upvoting it. Seems to be popular. This is posted to the Luminescent Lich blog on Blogspot. Lots and lots and lots of OSR stuff is posted on Blogspot. This is, just from yesterday, Wednesday, 30th of June. Experience points for different modes of play. This is a follow-up to another of their posts, thinking about experience points and design considerations. Let's see. Experience points for different modes of play. In my previous post, I talked a bit about how there are different modes of play in most OSR games, and that XP for treasure only really rewards dungeon crawling. This is great if your players are mostly dungeon crawling, such as exploring a mega dungeon and only really going back to town at the end of the session, mainly to sell and buy stuff. It's not so great if your players are doing other things like hex crawling, which is supposed to be an activity in and of itself, and not just something you do to get to the dungeon to dungeon crawl. I think for each major activity of play, you need a different way to gain experience points. It's why I think a lot of OSR blogs develop experience points rewards for exploration. However, also try to want to satisfy the other main guidelines I created. Number one, XP rewards should not be given for something that players will already do. XP rewards should encourage risk. 3, XP rewards or XP should be given at the end of a session. And I guess he goes over why he's adapted those guidelines in another post, which I will not read. We'll just take it as written for the moment. 3 main activities of play. The main models of play that I would want to grant XP for in my games are 1, dungeon crawling, 2, hex crawling, 3, investigating something big in the setting. There are arguably other major activities of play, such as spending time in town, buying and selling items, but I wouldn't grant XP for engaging in such things as players will likely do them anyway, and they contain very little risk. XP should be used to encourage player risk, and given as a reward for players successfully taking a risk. Dungeon crawling and hex crawling definitely involve lots of danger and risk. Investigating knowledge, not as much. It's a bit more dependent, but I think there are some cases where there is genuine risk. I'll explore that more when I come to that activity. Okay, XP crawling. For dungeon crawling, I'm just going to use the tried and tested XP for treasure via carousing with the following rules. So if you are not familiar with this, some systems have adapted kind of a carousing or a carousing XP mechanism. I kind of think at least this started trying to mimic sort of your Conan tales. If you've ever read any of the Conan stories, regardless of how much loot he would come away with at the end of one of the stories, he never starts off another story being wealthy. He's always down on his luck or doing an odd job or somewhere like that in some state of disrepute. So you wonder, well, where does all the treasure go? Well, it goes because they spend it. So they adapted. So systems have adapted rules for, hey, you don't even earn XP for getting the treasure back to town, is you earn XP for spending it, and you have to spend it on the kind of frivolous Conan-esque kind of pursuits, right? So we're talking, you're essentially, you live up a grand life for a short amount of time until you end up drunk in the worst tavern eventually, and that's where you pick up your next adventure. Maybe they've done other things with carousing rules that I haven't seen, so let's see what he says about them. Carousing is the easiest and the main way for a character to gain experience points, especially in early levels where they have yet to venture very far from their starting settlement. In short, carousing is action taken in a settlement in which the group spends a large amount of their hard-earned money, having a good time about town, blowing their fortune as they blow off steam before becoming desperate enough, again, to raid another crumbling ruin for treasure. Carousing lets players turn money directly into experience points at a 1-to-1 ratio. First, they choose an amount of money to convert into experience points. Then they roll on the following table to see how their bender went. After, they may have to roll on the carousing mishaps or fortunes table to see how their relationship with the people in the settlement has changed. Okay, so we've got a 2d6 roll. On the lower end of the table is experiences gained, but you've made fools of yourselves, and you're going to have to roll a mishap. Middle, basically your average, your center rolls are just you gain experience, and then if you roll 10 plus, you gain experience, and you've had some good luck, and you'll get some good fortune. I'm not going to read through the mishaps and fortunes, but you can imagine there's good and bad extras, and there are a bunch of them, 12 to be exact. I'm guessing this is a D12 roll as opposed to a 2d6 roll. He says he modified the one that Jeff Rentz posted on his blog. Oh, it's just meant to make things a little more interesting when you're getting your XP. And then he goes into XP, so I'm going to skip down to XP in hex crawling. Hex crawling is a bit more difficult than dungeon crawling. I don't want to just give a straight XP amount for every hex explored or new place discovered. Most of the time, players are going to do this anyway as a normal part of moving around the map, even if it's just to get to the dungeon. I want to encourage them to take risks. I'm going to borrow a rule I found in the Neoclassical Geek Revival by Zarkov Kowalski. Hopefully I pronounced that okay. Basically, in it, he had a rule where for every room the players explored, they gained cumulative XP. So if they got 10 XP the first room, they'd get 20 XP the second room, 30 XP the third, 50 XP the fourth, and so on and so forth. I'm going to do something similar, but for hex crawls, and call it Telling Tall Tales. So telling tall tales is another way characters can gain experience points. It involves spreading word of your travels and exploits, generally telling tall tales in places like taverns, at court, to the high and the low, shamelessly boasting and self-promoting, and to simply entertain or achieve status. This method of experience gain is generally used during the mid-levels as the characters begin to venture from their starting settlement more and begin to explore the world that surrounds them. So they get to gain a certain amount of experience points for every hex of the hex map they've explored since they last left the settlement. All right, so we got an XP table, And then there's some other roles, and they adapt that same mishap and fortune element. So that's kind of that. And then we have unraveling a mystery. And essentially there's not a set value. This is sort of ad hoc, I guess, as they explore things. So here are my initial thoughts. I will go back to the OSR board. So I use XP for exploration in my game. But I try not to do it as simply moving through a hex. If there's something of interest, kind of a point of interest in the hex, and the party finds it, I tend to think of there being one, say, overwhelming point of interest. There might be multiple small things, but there's one sort of major thing. If they find that major thing, I will award them XP for it. I don't like the idea of that cumulative XP just for hexes. I don't want to encourage players just to go to the furthest thing away that they can to get it. And I do disagree a little bit. Hex crawling is from getting from point A to point B. I don't know anybody who just gets in the game saying, yeah, we're just going to wander the map. Woohoo! No, you're wandering the map. You're looking for things. You're either looking for a dungeon that you already know something about, or another location, or an item, or you're looking to find something. You've heard of something, you want to find it, or you're going out because you think something is there. But ultimately, you are moving towards something. You are not just hex crawling to hex crawl. As a player, I just don't think, I just want to go out in the woods and walk around. No, you're going out in the woods because you want to find something. Something is out there you're looking for. Hopefully, you have some idea of where it is, so you're trying to get there. That's what hex crawling is about. So I don't want to reward just wandering around the map just for wandering around the map. I will say also that if you're using monsters and their lairs and lair treasure, that would count for XP, and some creatures can have pretty good loot in their lairs. So there are sources of XP inside the wilderness itself. And of course, part of getting the wilderness is getting to those dungeon places that also have that treasure. But I do like awarding XP for something involved with the hex crawling, but I want it to be something more specific. I don't want it to just be, because the players never see a hex. I never present my hex map to the players and say, here's the hex map. Now go places. To them, all that stuff's invisible. So to me, and they could look at it like you're just trying to find, there are interesting areas out there in the world. And when you find them, when you get that sense of discovery, here's a tip for finding them. So that's how I work that part. By the same token, I would not give XP for just cumulative rooms in a dungeon. To me, that's antithetical to the approach that I want. I don't want the party just going door to door, because that's room. Oh, one room, another room. How many rooms can we get so we can get the highest modifier on our XP? I don't want that. I want the party to make intelligent choices about which rooms are worth investigating, which rooms aren't. How efficient can we be? How smart can we be about finding the really good stuff? I don't want it to just be we got to open every door. Now, I know that those XP rewards for opening doors is small, but I don't think at a certain point in the beginning, I don't want it. And it might bring on more trouble to players than it's worth going into every door, because you're going to end up probably getting into more fights than you want to. And then at later levels, 10, 20, 30, 40, 50 XP, there drops in the bucket. So then they become meaningless. So I'm not interested in that one. I do like the ideas of telling tall tales and spending renown or gaining renown. I almost think that could be part of the carousing, and we don't need it to be a separate thing. To me, the finding the thing is the reward, not the telling everybody back home about the thing. But if you're going to do that, I think that can be part of that other system. I don't use carousing in my game because I kind of like the players to have long-term goals and thinking about how to spend their money and embedding them in the world. My players are already thinking about one of them starting a barber shop, essentially, kind of a barber surgeon, a business that they're very interested in investing their gold in. And I like that stuff. It gives them a foothold. It gives them something that they care about now. And you don't get that with carousing necessarily, because you're blowing all your gold on essentially right on a couple of table rolls. It doesn't really give you any more attachment to the setting. I would say that I would give them the option to. That's something where I could think about, hey, if you want to maybe get a little bit of extra XP bonus, but you're going to have these mishaps versus rewards, you could do that. Or you can, if you want to invest it in other things, you can do that. And then instead of getting the XP bonus, the investment is your reward. So I might put it as an option. I could see it throwing that out to my party saying, hey, this is another option for you if you're not interested in developing land or really doing that, and if you really just want to be kind of the Conan type adventurer, that's fine too. But I wouldn't force my party to do that. But Luminescent Lich, good job. Interesting read. I'll try to, let me go back and I will post this in the chat. Let's see, so other folks can read that. There we go. If you're interested in that one, I just posted that. And I'll put it in the show notes so that if you're listening to this later in podcast form or looking at the video and you can't access the chat, that you could see that. Okay. Where are we now? How are we on time? Looking good. Let me just refresh it. Okay. Ultraviolet Grasslands, which I have not read yet, so I will skip that. Neverland setting, I haven't read that either. Special effect dice. Let's check this out. Oh, and I didn't let me give another upvote. You tip your waiters and your waitresses, tip your wait staff, upvote your Redditors, fellow Redditors. This one posted by Entropic Scholar. Special effect dice. I found an interesting idea online, but they don't remember the source. Tisk tisk. That instead of rolling a 1d20 for role-playing games, you would use a set of specially made dice, d6s, and have each die face represent a specific result when rolled. I want to say, doesn't one of the Star Wars, maybe the current Star Wars games use special dice? I know DCC has special dice. I don't think they're all different symbols, but they might be. I don't think I've ever really used them. They want to try to recreate the idea into a solid rule set, and this is what they came up with. 6 is a success, 5 is advantage, 4 is ally, 3 is nothing, 2 is disadvantage, 1 is failure. They roll a number of dice equal to 1 plus their ability modifier, plus any bonuses they might have. Let's see. If they think this system could work really well, let's see his examples. I'm still trying to get an idea of what they're driving at with this. Okay, let's say Lydia wants to jump over a pit and is allowed 3 dice to roll in the attempt. She rolls 5, 3, 1. Advantage, nothing, and failure. This can be interpreted by the narrator in many ways, but one possibility might be Lydia backs up for running start and trips before getting to jump. She's not injured, but determined to try again. Mechanically, Lydia failed to jump the pit, suffered no penalty for her failure, and gains advantage on her next try. Example 2, Frankie, Frankie boy, swings his greatsword, attacking a group of goblins. He rolls 5 dice. Ooh, Frankie's a heavy hitter. With the results, 6, 6, 4, 3, 2. 2 successes, ally, disadvantage, and nothing. Frankie interprets this to mean that his attack swings true, striking a critical hit on the goblin, 2 successes, but he nearly hits his ally, Tom, as well, disadvantage ally. Tom is thrown off balance, and the next attack against him has advantage. The nothing die has no effect. Well, it is interesting. I don't know if I would use this in an OSR setting. There's so much things to interpret already that adding now that you're not going to have a clean cut a die rolling mechanic, that now all those die rolls are going to have to be individually interpreted at the time. It's going to slow the game down a lot. 2, it's going to invite disagreements, discussion, hopefully well-mannered conversations, but there's going to be a lot of back and forth over what they mean. In order becomes important. Does the disadvantage happen before the 2 successes? Or where does the ally fit in if that's rolled? There's just a lot going on there. The first example is just not worthwhile, because all you're saying is, okay, you failed the roll to no effect. So this was Lydia trying to jump the pit, fails to make the roll, doesn't fall into the pit, but now she has advantage on her next try. So all this roll is doing is saying, now roll again with advantage. That's a waste. I would rather do something that had various stages of success, but that moved things forward, not just, oh, well, it ends up being a wash, roll again, and then you have advantage or a potentially disadvantage. I want something that is final. And this is what I like to do in a lot of these cases when there are roles to do things. Climbing, jumping, running. You want to avoid the situations where you're just rolling a bunch of times without moving anything forward. If you fail to roll the pit, and then rolling a bunch of dice means you're going to get you're going to tend to get a whole lot of different of these results. So you're not just going to get success. You're going to tend to get some kind of mixture of success and one advantage, or success and failure, or nothing in advantage, nothing in ally. One, some of those may not even make sense. Two, you're going to get a lot of rolls that are not definitive. I want a definitive roll. Hey, you tried to jump the pit. You failed. I might look at how badly you failed. Maybe if you failed less than 5, you get to hang by your fingertips on the other side of the pit, and then potentially next round, somebody can jump over and pull you across, in which case you made it, just with some extra difficulty. Maybe you fell into the pit, something like that. I want to move things forward. I don't want it to just be a static situation. And I use this for stuff like breaking down doors, all those kind of things. I want to move the situation. Either now you've tried to break down it and you failed, so now the door is stuck and you're going to have to try something else, or you were able to get it open, but the door fell over, so it made a bunch of noise, and now things are coming. Failing forward, right? I want to keep things moving, but even more than failing forward, I want to make the situation remain dynamic. It doesn't always have to be moving forward. If you fail to break down the door or pick the door's lock and it's stuck, you haven't moved forward. You're not past the door, but the situation has now changed. Now there's this other element. Maybe there's a lot of noise. Now the door's stuck, and now you have to consider, are you going to do something more violent to the door, which is going to therefore create noise? Do you try to figure out another way through? I want the situation to change. And this looks like it could lead to a lot of things that are just gonna, they're gonna maybe change individual circumstances within, but also could just come up as a wash, or just kind of do nothing. The other thing is, do you really want a bunch of your rolls affecting the other party members? I think that as much that you might think in a narrative sense, oh, this is really cool. He's swinging this giant axe, but then in part of that swing, the guy, he doesn't see the guys next to him, and then that guy has to deal with it. But in the fiction, like, wow, that sounds really great. In the fiction, but we're playing a game, and in the game, do I want this guy to foul up what I'm doing just because he went before me? It's one thing if actions, they do it. And I always have thought it's a lot of fun when you're in a group or you're jamming a group and player A does something, and whatever they did, they either didn't listen or didn't know what player B was doing, but maybe you're the GM and you could say, oh, player B is going to try to do this thing, but then player A totally fouls it up. It's one thing if actions, you're doing that and therefore something bad happens and another player is kind of is put at a disadvantage or thwarted in some way. It's another thing if you're going to roll and you're rolling 5 dice. The more dice you're rolling and the better you are at something, the more dice in the system you're going to get, the more that that ally could come up, these different things could come up. And you're going to be constantly affecting your allies, both positively and negatively. And it's going to be okay. If you do it positively, no one's going to complain about that. But there's no intention there. You were just rolling dice, and then randomly stuff's going to happen. And then potentially, depending on you or the GM, if you had advantage, what if you had advantage, disadvantage, ally, success, and failure? Like, who's getting the advantage? Who's getting the disadvantage? All these things. If I'm the player, I'm going to say, oh, I want the advantage. And sorry, Tom, you're getting the disadvantage. And Tom's going to be like, what the F? I didn't have anything to do with that. Why am I getting disadvantage? Right? There's no intention there. If it's the rules of an action, you can see the intention of players and they may conflict. But there's no intention. It's just kind of random. So I appreciate kind of the attempt. I would probably put this on, have some sort of, try to figure out a way to kind of get a different bell curve. I know there's going to be a bell curve here with rolling a bunch of dice, but each individual one is all random. And it has the problem that a lot of systems do, which is you end up that the better you are at something, the more chances of fluky things are to happen, which should be the inverse. It should be that the more dice you have, the less chance fluky stuff's going to happen. And this kind of system doesn't have that. So it's interesting. It's intriguing. Not for me. All right. Let's see. What time is it? Looks like I got about, what am I looking at? 15 minutes left. All right. What can we get into in 15 minutes or less? Okay. Any Prison Break module recommendations? I don't have any, so I'm not going to go in there. We're getting a Astonishing Swordsman and Sorcerers of Hyperborea Kickstarter, 3rd edition. I might do that. I like that game. Let's see. We have someone else who's looking for reviewers. I could maybe put out a shout out for that, but I will do that on my own time. OSE's slow weapons. What's the point? Yeah. All right. Let's look at that one. I'm not even familiar with slow weapons in OSE. All right, this was posted by Darth Shibe or Shibe. I'm not sure what they're going for there. Give it an upvote. Upvote your fellow Redditors. I am guessing this is something covered here before. I am wondering why anyone would use a battle axe that requires 2 hands, always goes last, and only does D8 damage. Why wouldn't I just use a sword that does D8 damage? A 2-handed sword should do more damage or offer some reason to want to use it. And let's see, the top response is, it's a rare example of a poor rule in an otherwise great combat system. I just ignore it and always have. Well, there you go. So yes, 2-handed weapons. So let me tell you how I have a couple of, I don't know if I call it a couple. I have sort of a house mechanism on the different weapon types. So here's how I do it. 2-handed weapons, and I'm not using weapon speeds in my game. And I'm not sure if maybe this is one of the advanced things, because weapon speeds was an AD&D thing. Though I guess it was also in the white box, or was it just if you used chainmail? I can't remember. It's come and gone depending on what edition you're in. So slow weapons, usually your pole arms, 2-handed weapons, things like that. Now, often, if I remember back in chainmail, potentially in the white box and elsewhere, those weapons would actually go first in the first round, at least if they had that kind of length. So I would put something like a 2-handed axe here, which meant was if you were rushing a guy with a spear, or at least a polearm style spear, not a short spear, the spear would go first before you unless you also had a long weapon. And the reason is like they're at the ready, you're kind of coming in, and they can basically hit you before you get close. And this probably makes more sense if you think of it like you have a dagger, you're charging a guy with a halberd. Before you have to get really up close and personal if you're going to shiv the guy, shiv with your dagger. Whereas this guy can kind of start to swing at you from, you're still 10 feet away. So it makes sense that the person with that weapon would go first. Subsequent rounds, you've got that quick action that's going to trigger before the other guy gets to go. So there's that, but I'm not sure. I don't remember in Old School Essentials how they do it. So here's what I've been doing with my weapons. So I've actually been running all weapons doing D6. And I've actually thought about trying to do the class-based weapon damages, but I haven't settled on it. I'm not using it right now. D6 for all weapons. 2-handed weapons, which would include pole arms and obviously all the 2-handed swords and axes and etc. They double your strength bonus or your strength penalty. So if you have a -1 to strength and you pick up that 2-handed axe, it's going to be -2. Because these are weapons that really rely on your strength. If you're weak, it's going to make you seem weaker. But if you have a +2 to strength and using a 2-handed axe, now you're going to be +4 when it is going to, however strong or weak you are, it is going to enhance that. If you're using your normal weapons, you just get your strength bonus or your strength weakness as usual. So those medium weapons, most of your swords, 1-handed axes, those kind of things. If you got a plus to your strength, well, it'd be great. If you have a minus to your strength, that's going to work as well. Now I have one more thing, which is on those small weapons, daggers, knives, cudgels, those kind of things. They ignore your strength bonus or penalty completely. And I like this for me because I think about it. If you're the thief who has only an 8 in strength and you use a dagger, because the dagger essentially doesn't care about it. It's more about the precision and where you're stabbing them and potentially you're backstabbing them. So there's no, if you're it essentially doesn't benefit if you're some big beefy man's man, and it doesn't hurt you if you have noodle arms. So that's how I do it. So your small weapons, ignore strength one way or another. Your medium weapons, use your strength modifier as normal. And then your 2-handed, it's kind of large weapons, use double that modifier one way or another. No fun allowed, said in the chat. Astonishing Swordsman has a weapon class from 0 to 6, and if your weapon class is higher, you will attack first when the fighting starts. Okay, that's great. I think that's very similar to either OD&D or Chainmail or both that have something essentially along those same lines. I kind of really like that stuff, but I haven't found a great way to integrate it without it just causing a lot more work. This is the kind of things I would love if the virtual tabletops would help streamline. So you could have all this awesome stuff in there and it just does all the mechanics behind the scenes for you. So you don't have to deal with it, but you still get the benefits of all that granularity. Maybe they have it already. I don't know. Someday my VTT ship will come in. Okay. But that is that. I don't know if I really answered the question. Why do they have it? Maybe it's just a mistake. in OSE. I also think, just by the way, as an aside, I don't think that all weapons have to be equal. I don't think that just because there's a trident in the game, we have to justify a trident being as good as another weapon. It doesn't have to be. Some weapons, they're just not as good as other ones. And there's a reason why spears were used and spear-like weapons throughout the world, regardless of kind of the culture. And then other weapons were much more niche, or they're used for entertainment purposes or for whatever. That's fine. I don't need a whip to be the equivalent of everything else. If you want to use a whip, then you take the hit if it's not quite as good as something else, and you figure out how to optimize it. You find a way to add magic, find a magic whip, or do something like that. To me, that's on you as a player. You want to be a whip guy, then you figure out how to make it work. It's not up to me to make the whip the same as a longsword because they're not the same. That's me. That is me. Okay, did I skip some? Any update on Into the Unknown? I don't know anything about that. There's the dice pool. Am I doing it by hot or am I doing it by new? Oh, I'm doing it by hot. Let's do it by new. Keeps things a little bit. Okay. Oh, help running before. Experience points during the game. What have we got here? There's the slow weapons. Knave and Maze Rat's hack collection. I don't know. Boot Hill, first edition. Simple and freeform early TSR. Yeah, I like Boot Hill. I don't have first edition, but if you want to see them kind of adapt OD&D into a totally different genre, that's definitely a good one to check out. Oh, here we go. D6 weapon damage alternative. All right, I'm interested. This was submitted by Visual Insurance. That's visual_insurance to you. All right. Here's my take. I don't like adding numbers, and neither do I need long weapons tables if the same effect can be achieved by more simple and intuitive means. All weapons laid out in 6 lines. Okay. All weapons deal d6 damage. Fighters and dwarves reroll 1. Mages and halflings reroll 6. Two-handed and two-weapon fighting. Roll 2d6 and keep the highest. Note, you substitute -1 shield AC for +1 damage on average. Crossbow, roll 2d6 and keep the highest. Must reload instead of moving. If hit in between rounds, reload fails. Unarmed, roll 2d6 and keep the lowest. Improvise, destroyed on a 1. All right, so these are some very interesting, easy rules. I can dig it. Let's see. All weapons deal d6. I'm down with that. Fighters and dwarves rerolling 1s. Yeah, I can see that. That's a nice perk. Yeah, I could even see that something that maybe that grows over time. So let's say maybe at 4th level, right, they become heroes. Maybe they can reroll 1s and 2s. Then maybe even when they're superheroes, they could reroll 1s, 2s, and 3s, which could be interesting. Two-handed and two-weapon fighting, roll 2d6 and keep the highest. Yep, I think I might do those differently. So what I might do if I was going to do this style is I definitely like for two-handed weapons, roll 2d6, keep the highest. I think that's fine. For two-weapon fighting, I wouldn't do that because I don't want them to be the same. What I would do instead would be you would have advantage on your attacks. So since you're making two-weapon attacks, you have a better chance to hit, but your damage is not affected. Whereas for two-handed weapons, it's the damage, right? So I guess you're essentially trading. For two-weapon fighting, you're getting a better chance to hit. Two-handed weapons, better chance of doing more damage. And then as a player, you're making that choice. The way it's kind of set up here, they're sort of the same, and I'd like to keep them different. So that's how I would do that one. But in general, I like that. Crossbow, roll 2d6 to keep the highest. Must reload instead of moving. So in my games, I have hand crossbows. I'm not sure if he's talking just about hand or light crossbows versus regular ones. I don't force them to not move, but they have to take a full round or full action, let's say, to reload. So once they fired that hand crossbow the first time, the next round, if they want to fire it again, they can move around just fine, but they have to reload it. They have to spend their action reloading it. They can't attack. They can't reload an attack or do anything. And so far, can't speak for what may happen down the road, but so far I think it's been good because it has encouraged my players, to use those kind of crossbows in the way that I think it makes the most sense, which is as an opening salvo if you have a chance, right? So you imagine your situation, the enemy's 30 feet away. If you've tried to negotiate, whatever, stuff breaks down. Now it's go time. you win initiative, the enemy hasn't closed on you yet, bam, you could fire your light crossbow, then you could holster it, or, whatever, stow it away, or if you wanted to automatic, if you want to in the same action pull out your weapon, drop it, and then go on to the next one. In the next round, close or into melee, do whatever you're going to do. That's really how I think these are at least the way I envision them. I'm not saying it's realistic, but that's how I envision how they would be used. And so far, it's been working out that way. Very rarely have the players taken the time to basically lose another round by reloading it. I think once or twice it's happened, mostly because the player's character was in missile distance and for reasons didn't want to get close anyway, so that they took the round. But it makes it an interesting choice for them, because the more that they can reload the crossbow. They're obviously giving up an action to do it, so that hurts. And then I play with the Lamentations firing into melee rule, so I don't outlaw it completely like in BX. I think it just says if someone's in melee, you cannot fire at that creature. I don't do that, but I use the Lamentations version, which essentially is if you're just going to take a snapshot at it, there's equal chance of hitting anybody in there, and then you can spend additional rounds aiming. So it rarely makes sense, given all of that, to reload the crossbow unless the enemy's 100 feet away and they're going to take multiple turns to close. Unarmed, I think that's okay. Roll d20 and keep the lowest, or roll the d20. Roll 2d6 and keep the lowest. Yeah, I mean, I don't know how. I'm not sure how advantage and disadvantage works on d6s. I don't know what that makes the average damage for unarmed, but that's not unreasonable just at first glance. And yeah, improvised, destroyed on 1. I like that. I might also re-roll 6s for improvised weapons. They are improvised, so they also gives you another chance to roll 1 if you roll 6, or maybe that if you roll 6, you get the damage, but it's also destroyed. So it's essentially instead of just being a 1 in 6 chance, it's 16 and whatever chance of getting destroyed. It's a 33% chance. But yeah, overall, those are good. Let me upvote your fellow Redditors. That was kind of cool. Let's see. Do I have time for one more? Okay. When divination goes horribly right, the fateless. This is something. Okay. I'm not going to leave. I just want to stay on Reddit this time, so I'm not going to go off there, but it might be interesting. Oh, let's see. CYOA as character creation. I'm not sure what that means, but I'm curious. This was posted by Ikyoder. Sorry if I butchered that. Ikojder. Okay, they say, I've been experimenting with a small set of branching questions like an old school choose your own adventure game. I see that, hence CYOA. As a character creation tool, players go through a set of 4 to 5 questions, and each path leads to a different archetype character that then can be sort of customized. It's a ton of work, and before going any further, I was wondering if any games have implemented that sort of process. Does anybody know of any games using choose your own adventure-like questions for character creation? I have no idea in the tabletop role-playing space, but because I'm an old man, I remember playing Ultima 4. I think it was Ultima 4. Maybe other Ultimas had it too, but that had the exact same or a very similar concept. The game starts with you entering a gypsy's tent, and you would go through these kind of questions, and they had probably about the similar handful of questions, 4 or 5. The choices, you essentially would have 2 choices, I think, and by the time you got to the end of it, you had an archetype, you had a class essentially that was given to you. I do not recall whether you could skip it if you just wanted to play something and you could do it, or if you wanted to, just not use that system if you had a choice. It's interesting. I think it's something that is better for beginning players. I wouldn't want to force people to go through it after their first character, or if they're a veteran into the system. I think it's a good tool. So if you have new players and they have a feeling for the kind of character they want to play, but not necessarily what class that character is, then you could ask them some questions, kind of guiding them down a path. Hey, do you want to be, these are going to be overly simplistic and you can get, but I think you don't want them to be too esoteric. You don't want it so that you can't see the path you've taken. Like you don't want it to be like what was the tests from Blade Runner? The Hoyt-Vaught test, where they're asking you 100 questions, and some of the stuff is you see a turtle in the desert and you want to flip it over. How do you feel? Right? You excuse me. You want things to be fairly obvious so you can kind of guide the players. Do you prefer to solve your issues by mystical means, or by guile, or by force of arms, right? And you can see one of those leads to clerics or wizards, and then one leads to thieves, and one leads to fighters, right? And you can kind of suss it out. So I think it would work. I think it definitely. I remember back in the day, Ultima, and not Ultima Online, but actually I want to say it's Ultima 4, but I don't remember exactly. Some folks have posted in the comments there that Beyond the Wall has an interesting character creation system, and so does Mouse Guard. Beyond the Wall, I haven't read it forever, but it's a good one. So I can see some of that for new characters, new players rather. But I think after you've done it once, I don't know what the appeal is it from a player to do it again, because probably if maybe it's your first game of D&D or whatever OSR version you're playing, you kind of need it, or you want it. It's a good help aid to you. But after that, you probably have an idea of what you want to play next. And then it's either, do I need to game my answers to get, I want to play a fighter, so I know in the question about how do I want to solve problems, okay, I'm going to pick this. And then I got to try to think about what I'm answering to get the one I want. It's a nice choice, but I wouldn't do it as my only thing. All right. Thanks, everybody who came in the chat today. This was something I'm going to try to... So I want to try to keep doing these hourly videos as work and life allows. These kind of lunchtime chats. I really do I get a kick out of doing them. Maybe I'll do this. I'll try to break out different things on different days. I do kind of like the idea of surfing around OSR and just checking things out, because it always gives me things to think about anyway, and inspiring, and then I can just kind of riff on them with everyone who's here in the chat. If there are things you see online that you think might be interesting topics, shoot them over to me in comments on videos or on Twitter or wherever you happen to find me. I'd love to take a look. Have a great July 4th weekend if you're in the US of A, where we are celebrating July 4th this weekend. I will not be streaming tomorrow or Monday for the holiday, but I will hopefully be back after that. If you like these, please give me a thumbs up. If you're in here or watching this, listen to this, and you're not subscribed, please go ahead and subscribe. Subscribing and give me the thumbs up. They do a lot of things behind the scenes for me in terms of YouTube and all these other services, algorithms and whatnot, and just lets me know that you are enjoying what I am putting out and appreciate it. I do have Ko-fi and Patreon links if you want to support the channel in that way. And if you are listening to this in podcast form, or if you would like to subscribe to the podcast, I think there's a link to that in the description also. But hey, leave me a review and give it a rating so I can get some of those, because I have none, and it makes me sad. But have a great weekend, holiday weekend or otherwise. Peace out. I will talk to you later.